So we're starting here in line 431, and we have here the narrator, Aeneas, actually addressing his, his country, essentially, in direct speech. So this phrase, iliaki kineres, here, is in the vocative case, and it means Ilion ashes. So Ilion meaning Trojan, and then ashes referring to the sort of burnt remains of the city. So he addresses them. He says Ilion ashes, and then we get another vocative phrase, extrema flamma, final flame, and then meorum is genitive plural, meaning of my people, presumably, of my people. So Ilion ashes and final flame of my people. And then the main verb is testor, which is deponent, looks passive but has an active meaning, and it means I call you to witness. And that's related to words like testify and testimony in English. So he says, Ilion ashes and final flame of my people, I call you to witness. And then we're going to go into an indirect statement, accusative and infinitive. I call you to witness that. And then we have an in plus ablative phrase, in ocasu vestro, in your ocasus, your ruin or downfall, right? In your ruin, now this should be an accusative in the indirect statement, right? We should have a word like may here, but you just have to imagine may, because this is quite compressed poetic Latin. So and then here's our infinitive in indirect statement, vita visse, which is a perfect infinitive, meaning I avoided. So I call you to witness that in your ruin I avoided nec tela, neither weapons, nec ullas, case, nor any hazards or dangers. Case is just like pericula. So he's basically saying, he's addressing the fallen city, and he's saying, please vouch for me that I wasn't a coward in these final moments of Troy. I fought as best I could. So he says, I call you to witness that in your ruin I avoided neither weapons nor any hazards. And si fata, if the fates, fuissent, had been, so that's pluperfect subjunctive because we're in a conditional here, if the fates had been, and we have to supply a word in English here. The idea is if the fates had been minded, right? In other words, if the fates had wanted, ut caderem, that I should fall, ut plus imperfect subjunctive, if the fates had been minded that I should fall, or if the fates had wanted me to fall, manu danaum, okay, manu is ablative singular, by the hand, or at the hand, and then danaum is genitive plural, of the Danaans, who are the Greeks. So if the fates had been minded that I should fall at the hands of the Danaans. And then we have another perfect infinitive in indirect statement, meruisse, just like vita visse in the previous line. So I call you to witness that I had earned it, right? Meruisse, like in the word merit in English. If you merit something in English, you deserve it. This is a slightly strange thing for Aeneas to say. It's a little bit unclear what he means by it, but I guess the idea is that for these ancient peoples, the best kind of death you could have is a heroic death in battle. So basically, Aeneas is saying, if I had been fated to die in battle, which I wasn't because he survives the battle, but if I had been fated to die in battle, then I had earned that heroic death, right? I had fought hard enough that I had earned this heroic, glorious death in battle. That, I think, is what he's saying here. So, um, so he says, I call you to witness that in your ruin I avoided neither weapons nor any hazards, and if the fates had been minded that I should fall at the hand of the Danaans, that I had earned it. Okay, now, new sentence in line 434. And we start with a present passive verb, divellimur, so we are torn or ripped from there, in there, so we're torn from that place. And then we get two more Trojan names, Iphitus et Pelias. Iphitus and Pelias may come with me. This is just cum plus ablative. It's the same as cum may, but with pronouns you often just stick the word cum at the end. So may cum, te cum, se cum, nobis cum, vobis cum. So Iphitus and Pelias with me. And then we go into brackets here. So quorum, genitive plural of qui, quae, quod. So that means of whom. So of whom, Iphitus, and then we have to supply or imagine the verb here, so erat or something, of whom Iphitus was by now, yam, grawi or heavier, or perhaps in better English, rather heavy, with age, iwo. So iwo is ablative case, heavy with, so Iphitus is heavy with age. He's an old man. So Iphitus and Pelias with me, brackets, of whom Iphitus was now rather heavy with age. And Pelias, et Pelias, slowed down, tardus, slowed down. And then we have the ablative noun vulnere, by a wound, ulixi, genitive case of Ulixes, so of Ulysses. So I'll just go through that bit in brackets again. Of whom Iphitus was now rather heavy with age, and Pelias slowed by a wound of Ulysses. So these are not exactly the crack troops here. Okay, so they're very beleaguered in various ways. They're weakened in various ways. So then we get to this adverb protinus, straight away or immediately, like statim. Straight away, vocati, perfect passive participle, so it means having been called by the clamour, so clamore is ablative case, by the clamour, ad sedes, ad plus accusative, to the house. Grammatically, sedes is plural, but we can translate it as singular, to the house of Priam. So Priami is genitive case there, of Priam. So I'll just go back to divellimur for a moment. So we are torn from there, Iphitus and Pelias with me, of whom Iphitus was now rather heavy with age, and Pelias slowed by a wound of Ulysses, straightway called by the clamour to the house of Priam. And at this point, the scene or the setting of the poem shifts because we now move to the palace of Priam, who is the king of Troy. So we go into a rather difficult section now. So we can start with hic vero. So hic meaning here, vero meaning indeed. So here indeed. And the reason that this is a difficult few lines is mainly because the main verb is all the way down here in line 441. It is cernimus. So I would translate that after vero. So here indeed we see, and then the object is in Gentem Pugnam, a huge battle. And then keu here means as if, and it's going with a subjunctive, forent. Subjunctive because it's not real, right? We're imagining. It's as if something were the case, but that thing is not the case. So that's why we're using a subjunctive here. As if there were caetera bella, other wars, nowhere, nusquam. So, in other words, the fight going on at Priam's palace is so great, it's so significant that it just dwarfs all the other fights that are going on, right? It's as if that's the only battle that's happening. Okay, so here indeed we see a huge battle as if there were other wars nowhere. And then we continue this sort of hypothetical. So as if none, nulli, no people were dying, morerentur, in tota urbe, in plus ablative, in the whole city. So again, we're still in this kind of imaginary scenario, right? It's as if there were no wars anywhere else, and it's as if no people were dying in the whole city. Okay, seek. Thus, and then I would probably translate cernimus again. We see, because this is still governing these objects, Martem indomitum, Mars untamed. And here, Mars, I don't think is referring to literally the god Mars. I think it's being used just to mean war in general. So we see Mars untamed and Danaos, the Danaans or Greeks, still the object of cernimus. We see the Greeks, ruentis. Okay, now ruentis is a present participle, as you can see from the NT here, and the IS ending, it is in fact accusative plural. In prose, it would be ruentes. So we see the Greeks rushing ad tecta, to the roof. Grammatically, tecta is plural, but I would translate it as singular. And so there are still other things that we see. We see the limen, the threshold, that's another object of cernimus. We see the threshold besieged. Okay, so obsessum is a PPP, perfect passive participle, agreeing with limen. We see the threshold besieged by the testudine, the tortoise formation, which is a kind of military formation. We see the the threshold besieged by the tortoise formation. So this is ablative because it means by the tortoise formation having been made or brought up against it. That's acta. So acta is a PPP, perfect passive participle, agreeing with testudine. So I'll just go back through this from hic again. So here indeed, hic vero, we see, cernimus, a huge battle in Gentem Pugnam, as if there were, ceu forent, other wars nowhere, caetera bella nusquam, as if none were dying, nulli morerentur, in the whole city, tota in urbe. Thus, seek, we see, cernimus again, Mars untamed, Martem indomitum, and the Danaans, Danaosque, rushing to the roof, ruentis ad tecta, and the threshold, limen, besieged, obsessum, by the tortoise formation, testudine, that had been brought up against it, acta. Okay, let's go on a bit further. So the subject in the next sentence is scalae, which are ladders, as in the English word scale. So ladders cling, hirent, this is like the word adhesive in English. Ladders cling to the walls. So parietibus, parietibus with a long A, parietibus. This is dative case following hirent. So ladders cling to the walls. And sub, this is sub plus accusative, meaning under. So under the ipsos postis, under the very roof beams, or you could say under the roof beams themselves. So postis is this poetic ending, which would be postes in prose with an E. So under the very roof beams, they climb, nituntur, deponent verb, looks passive but has an active meaning. They climb by the rungs. So gradibus is ablative plural, meaning by the rungs. We get words like grade and gradation and things from that in English, because each grade of something is like a rung on the ladder. So they climb by the rungs, and quer they obiciunt, they hold up, and then the object of that is klipeos, accusative plural. They hold up shields ad tela, towards the missiles. So that's ad plus accusative, towards the missiles. Missiles just meaning anything that is thrown from above. So they hold up shields towards the missiles, protected. So protecti is a PPP, perfect passive participle, protected by their left hands. So sinistris is ablative plural, protected by their left hands. They clutch, prensant, the battlements, fastigia, with their right hands. So dextris is another ablative plural, with their right hands. So essentially, the image we have here is we're at the palace, and there's two things happening here, two things that the Greeks are doing. One is that they have formed a tortoise formation at the ground level, right? This tortoise formation is attacking the threshold, the front doors. And the tortoise formation, you can look this up on Google Images, the tortoise formation is a good way for these Greeks to protect themselves from all the spears and arrows and rocks and whatever else that the Trojans are going to throw down at them from above, from the battlements. On the other hand, you then have another group of Greeks who are trying to scale the walls, right? So they've put ladders up against the walls of the Trojan palace. They are climbing up these ladders. In their left hands, they're holding up shields to try and deflect all the stuff that the Trojans are throwing down on them. And then in their right hands, they're gripping the battlements, the walls. So it's a very scary moment for the Trojans. They're being attacked on two different fronts in their palace. One group of Greeks attacking the front door, one group of Greeks climbing up the walls with ladders.